A friend of mine, Charles Lavige and John Lavige, two brothers who had attended Little Flower Academy, my high school, and they had graduated there, same as I. I was attending Grambling University there in Louisiana while they were attending Alaska Methodist University here in Anchorage. Alaska Methodist University is now Alaska Pacific University. But at any rate, they were out there and stars on the basketball team and all kind of incredible news clippings and stuff they were sending back of how wonderful things were. And in December of 1964, they came home for Christmas, and we were talking on my front porch, and the window's like right here, and my grandmother overheard the conversation, which was something like, man, it's really good up there, the jobs are plentiful, and we're out at the university and we're in the newspaper and She overheard all of this. So after, the visit was over, my buddies had taken off and I'm in the house. She said, boy, sound like it's a good opportunity up there. Maybe you need to go on up there and take a look at it. So with that encouragement and Charles and John both saying, yeah, man, come on up. I did. Came here January the 5th, 1965. I came here and found things very much different. Socially and economically, I found a more welcoming community for people of color and a great deal of achievement. A lot of black-owned clubs and restaurants were here at the time, and I was rubbing elbows with black people who had big wads of money in their pocket because they were working doing construction and building and doing things, and it was just a fascinating place and time. So fell in love with it, and my visit to see how it was is still ongoing.
I'm teaching in Hopewell, Virginia. Well, we had just gone back to school, just like now when the kids are going back to school, and it's February now, so it was in January. And we had our first staff meeting. The principal had a bunch of brochures on the table in the lounge for our staff meeting. I picked it up. It said Math and Science Institute, University of Alaska Fairbanks. So I said to my coworker, I said, oh, wouldn't that be neat if I could get a master's from the University of Alaska Fairbanks? Now, this is 1961. Who's thinking about Fairbanks in Petersburg, Virginia, Hopewell, Virginia? I certainly was not, but because it had University of Alaska Fairbanks, that intrigued me a little bit, and I thought, oh, that'd just be neat, and it would be. 2 weeks later, my husband came in and said, get ready, we're going to Alaska. I said, really? I said, when you bring orders, I know we're going. March the 31st, I resigned my job. April the 21st, we arrived in Alaska. May 1969, I received my master's from the University of Alaska Fairbanks.
I had 2 brothers and their family here at the time, and I decided to come to Alaska to really find myself or to start my life. And I was supposed to be here for a month. I only had enough money that lasted me for 2 weeks. So I ended up going to job service and get a quick refer job for a couple of weeks, and I found one at Alaska Kitchen, which we were making butcher blocks, table legs, cabinet doors, stuff like that. And after my 2 weeks was up, he asked me did I wanted to stay on permanent. And I told him I had to go and talk to my folks. I'll let him know in a day or two. So I went home and talked to my parents, and I told them that I would like to stay for a while. And I've been here ever since, 45 years. Took a while for me to get used to the long days. I found myself at 11, 12 o'clock at night, sometimes barbecuing, doing the lawn, or what have you, because it was so bright out. So it was quite different.
It's a funny thing. My wife and I, she liked to fuss and argue all the time, and I didn't care for it at all. So I was at the table one night, and she was just fussing at me about something. I can't remember now what it was, but she just fussing and arguing at me. And I had been talking with a guy about Alaska. He was from Alaska. He had told me some things about Alaska. And I had wanted to come up here because of work. From what I heard, it was like a whole lot of work here. A little different than what it was, but that's what I heard. Anyway, I thought about all that, and I told her, I said, hey, you know what? She said, what? I said, you know, the next time you're fussing and arguing at me like you're doing now, I said, you know what I'm going to do? She said, what? I said, I'm going to Alaska. And she said, now you're going to go to Alaska. And she fussed at me about Alaska about, I don't know, I'd say not more than 5 minutes, but we argued on out, and after a while the whole thing settled down. And, about 2 weeks later, I figured it was about 2 weeks. It looks like she was saying the same thing. She wasn't, but she was doing the same thing the same way. And I just thought about what I had told her. I said, hey, you know what? She said, what's that? I said, you know what I told you the other day? She said, what? I said, you know, I told you next time we fussing and arguing at each other like this for nothing. I said, I was going to go to Alaska. Yeah. So she fussed at me about Alaska about 5 or 10 minutes. So I went on out to the airport and got my ticket.
We were kindergartners together. And him and I have known each other our entire lives. Our families known each other. We attended the same church several times. And he came here, like he said, before me, after graduating high school. And his mother passed away, and he came back for his mother's funeral. And we reconnected again, and we started to talk on the phone, and about a year had passed. In December, he proposed, and I accepted, and this will be 42 years later. And that's why I'm here in Alaska now.
I'm originally from South Carolina, and I joined the military, and my first assignment was in Texas, San Antonio, which was extremely hot. Coming from Carolina was extremely hot. And I went from Texas to Biloxi, Mississippi, which was hot and humid, 100 degrees and 100% humidity. And at that time in the military, you could put in a dream sheet. And so after being in Carolina, Texas, and Mississippi, I put on my dream sheet Alaska, Germany, Alaska. I got Alaska. I wanted cool weather. Once I got here, I found a unique atmosphere here among people. I was seen, talked to, and interacted with more as a human rather than a black person. I sensed very little prejudice. There was some, even in the military on Elmendorf where I was stationed, there was some. But overall, in the public downtown, it was the one place where everybody spoke. You pass somebody in the car, you wave. You went into a business, went into an establishment, and everybody spoke and everybody treated you like you was a person, not white or black. And that was something I had never experienced in my life.
I was born in the Mississippi Delta, left in 1965, headed to Chicago. That was a way of getting away from the South. Mississippi is, I should say, Chicago is known as Big Mississippi because most of the people that are there are from Mississippi. They migrated there. It was a great migration that took place to get away from the plantations. Of course, I was young. I started high school, got active in politics. 1968, I was trained by a precinct captain that was part of Mayor Daley's team. He taught me how politics worked. I participated in the protests in 1968, the Democratic riots and everything that took place at the outside of the Democratic Convention there. I was out there in Grant Park with the Chicago 8 as a 17-year-old. I organized with Reverend Jesse Jackson, marched in Springfield, which is the capital. I didn't complete my deferment work, so I got drafted, and I was sent to Fort Polk, Louisiana, for basic training. Went to Fort Gordon, Georgia, which is outside of Augusta. Did my advanced training as a military police, and I was, Nixon had ended the war, but they were sending military police over there to help get people out of there. And the news came that we were not, that 9 of us were not going to go to Vietnam, was going to Alaska. And I was excited about it. The others thought I was nuts. And the reason I was excited about it is I was watching the television, and there was a commercial talking about oil had been discovered in Alaska and how much a great opportunity that would be for people that was trying to make some money. And that was what was in the back of my mind. And we came here and at Fort Greely, at Fort Greely, and I got out because there was opportunity on the pipeline. I already had that in the back of my mind.
So my uncles, going back, my uncle, I wish I could say their names now, Luther and Hersey Sampson came to Alaska back in the early 50s, like maybe 51, 52, and started businesses and did really well. And most of my family was in the Los Angeles area, Watts, California specifically. And so my mom was a teacher there in Watts, and she came to visit them because like, what are you guys still doing in Alaska? You know, nobody had unheard of. And so she came to visit them and liked it. And this was right around the time when Watts was having a lot of racial tension. Not the riots, I think the riots started after that. But she came here and liked it. She just liked it because it was quiet, you know, and you could, like the last frontier basically. And so she decided to transfer her teaching credentials to Alaska and moved here. And then my uncles ended up leaving. One uncle went to Hawaii, the other one to Seattle. So she was here, became a teacher, ended up being the first black teacher hired by the Anchorage School District, and then taught at several schools, including Government Hill and, you know, I don't know, Denali and et cetera. And then became a principal, became the first black principal here. So she never left. She lived here, and I was, you know, basically raised here. I just remember that time. I remember, you know, gravel and unpaved streets in Fairview, where I grew up. I remember, like, where I live now was all forest and trees. There was nothing. And so, you know, just little things like that. Just like I said, but it didn't seem boring. We played outside. You know, we played games outside until it got dark, which was never. A lot of community kids played together. We played outside. And so, you know, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have Nintendo and all that, you know. So, I don't know. It was a great place to grow up. Anchorage was a great place to grow up in.
I have relatives living here. My cousin was teaching on Elmendorf, and her husband was a military policeman on Elmendorf. And her brother and I came up together to sort of venture and see the mountains and fish and get into things that we talk about when we were kids. I never thought I'd be here in Alaska, but it worked out that way. And I've been here ever since. every day it was like an adventure, something new that I wasn't used to. And being from the South, snow was like a treat. We'd get out and try to make a snowman before the snow melted. And here is this winter wonderland for 8 and 9 months, and I really liked that. And once I got my gear and started meeting people, I just fell in love with it. Still, I love Anchorage, love Alaska. I had so many different experiences with good people that it was a no-brainer. I decided to stay.
I worked at API nursing for 13 years. Then I transferred over to corrections. And I had a hard time when I first got into corrections because I already had 13 years of state service. So most of the people in corrections thought I was coming over wanting to be the superintendent because of my time and grade with the state. And that was not true. So I had a hard time. I was almost forced out. But I stayed, and I buckled, and I hung in there. So I finally ended up becoming the first black female sergeant in corrections. But I tell you one way I made it is that I never got down to their level. When I'd go to job, I prayed when I walked in the front door, the Lord help me through the day. But I had a little black book. Every little thing that I saw wrong went in that book. Because that's how they try to get you, by trying to check and find every little thing wrong on you. But you don't have to fight with people on the job. You don't have to lower yourself to that level. You just document. Just keep documenting that documentation that comes to play someday, and it saves you. I know from experience, because that was me.
And the first thing I did when I got to town was get an application for API. And when I went in for an interview, the interviewer asked me about my experiences, and I told him I had my certificates and paperwork with me, and he told me that, well, we don't do that kind of thing here. And I didn't get the job. And about 3-4 months later, I called to check to see if I could come in for another interview. And they said, yeah, come on in. We still have your name here. And when I went in for the interview, it was a different person. And she seemed to be impressed about my background. And she was telling me most of the guys that came to work didn't have much of a background. And she wanted to know when I could get started. And I was like, really? And she said, yeah, you could start April 16th of that year, 73. And I started working. And once I got started, I learned that a lot of the guys that they hired didn't know half the things that I knew. But that's the way it went. That was about the only incident that I had, other than the patients. It's a tough job when people are calling you all kinds of racial slurs, and your only recourse is to try to talk to them and calm them down without confrontation. and got pretty good at that.
My favorite thing here is work, being able to find something to do. I was able to find work pretty much all the time because I knew what I was looking for and I know how to handle it when I found it. So I didn't have much of a problem doing what I was trying to do. I was a journeyman carpenter that could do anything in the carpenter field. So anything they had to do, they always called me in on it. And I learned a lot that I didn't know. And I had a chance to do a lot of stuff that I did know. So I got a lot of work done. I work steady. And the guy that I hooked up with, he really liked the way I worked. And that guy, we hooked up and we stayed together 16 years.
Well, I did some construction, but when I first got here, I started out doing custodial work. And I went on from there, and I did work with the squeezy shop. It was a screen printing shop. Went on from there, and I started working at API. And I first started out there as custodian. I worked there for 12 years. And I transferred over into maintenance as a groundsman, where I took care of all the snow removal, the mowing the lawns, the planting of the flowers, and all that type of stuff. And I did that for 2 years. Then I got promoted again to inside the shop. When I went to the shop, they kept denying me. And they kept telling me that I wasn't qualified. At that time, I was still on the grounds. But they was hiring other folks from the hospital, nurses, whatever, into the maintenance shop, and I knew that they didn't have experience either. So I took it up on my own and went out and got my boiler license, fireman license. I took courses just trying to better myself so I would be qualified. And after I did all these things, you know, they were still turning me down for the job. So I had to write a letter to the director of the hospital. I gave a copy to the union, Local 71, and I sent a letter to Juneau, to the state. And by the time that got to working around, the director came to me and told me if I withdraw that letter, that the job will be mine. And at that time, I started working in the shop, the maintenance. And I worked there for 18 years.
Initially upon joining, my training officer told me, no uncertain terms, that blacks should not be troopers, and his goal was to make sure I didn't become one. And so that was my introduction to after getting out of the academy. I worked through that in my special way. I took him up to the out of reach of anybody, anything up in Hillside, and had a private talk with him. And came back to the office and told the supervisor what I had done, and he relieved him and gave me another training officer. But overall, It became a great career. I got to see the entire state of Alaska. I retired as a commander. I was the first black commander for the state troopers. And so for me, it was a great career. Like I said, I worked all parts of Alaska from Ketchikan to Barrow. I was deputy commander for all of Western Alaska. I was a commander in Southeast, all of Southeast Alaska. And I was a commander for South Central Alaska. So for me, those first few weeks of turmoil turned out to be a very successful and rewarding career.
It wasn't until I left Louisiana, where they say is the segregated South, and was in the military in California, where they say liberation is everywhere, that I saw the real difference of who had the power and who was in the majority number-wise, etc. I thought there were more black people than white until I went out there and saw, oh, wow, the world is different in terms of number and in terms of economic and social power, etc. Coming here to Alaska, I saw that there were very few black people, but they were held in high esteem. They had a certain skill that was necessary. Charlie could do concrete. Charlie was important because Charlie could do concrete. The men were making big money in labor and in construction, etc. All of the sanitation workers were black. The ones who actually was doing the lifting and throwing the garbage in the thing, they were doing dirty work, but they were being well paid. So these guys would come to the Nevada Club or somewhere cleaned up and stuff and buy drinks for everybody in the house, etc. So he felt, hey, this place is something else. A guy walked in and bought a drink for everybody in the club. Wow, he must really have money. No, he ain't got no money. This is money. Wow, man, these guys. So I was fascinated. People were walking around with nugget watches and rings and all of that. So it was complete, eye-opening for the country boy coming up, seeing all of this going on.
Being here, I just met a whole host of people and became friends. My first roommates were Caucasians. I lived by myself for a while, and then I wanted to be close to API because I had bought a little hoopty car. And I was afraid that if it didn't start during the winter, I lived in Spenard, that I would have to walk to work, and I didn't want to be late for work. I just got a new job. So I was talking to some of the nurses at API about finding an apartment close to work. And I just threw it out there. And then I got a phone call. It was a guy that worked in the hospital. He said, hey, I heard you were looking for an apartment. He said, I'm looking for an apartment too. He said, maybe we can share an apartment. And I said, well, yeah. He said, well, I'll come up and introduce myself. So he came up. His name was Tom Page. And he came up, and Tom was from Savannah, Georgia. And we got to talking, and I picked up on his accent right away, and I was like, oh, wait, let's talk about this. And he was a really, really nice person. So we called up, got an appointment to look at an apartment right behind API. And the guy came over, and we rented that apartment, and began a relationship that lasted for a long time, Tom and I. And the nurses at API at the time asked me, how do you guys get along? You're from South Carolina and black, and he's from Savannah, Georgia, white. I said, well, we get along just fine.
When I was growing up, I grew up in the South. My parents didn't teach us to hate, no matter what. They didn't teach us to hate. And I think they grew up with me and my other sisters, because there were 8 of us. We got along with most everyone. I look back and I think about my parents, how they taught us we could have easily been involved in a lot of hate because we felt people were doing things to us. And when I say that, I mean the minorities. Or, you know, didn't want you in the restaurants, didn't want you around them in the neighborhoods and all of that. And I'm not saying that it was not a problem that we thought about, but we did not let it turn us the other way. My parents taught us to still persevere and do the best you can in life. And so I think that had a lot to do with the way we did grow up to do the best we could. And I'm really proud of my family.
And so at that time, we had, I don't have that book, but I had a book that had this picture in it. I was teaching 4th grade at that time. And it said the water fountains in the book at that time, you know, colored, 2 fountains. One was colored, one was white. And I told my kids that Abaloo, I said, you believe Miss Foster tasted that water, don't you, that white water? And they said, oh yeah, we believe you did. I said, but it didn't taste any differently. I said, it was just water, you know, and so anyway. Oh yeah, but I really didn't have too many problems, you know?
We didn't actually have it as hard as others, but we had our difficulties. See. And we were what grade when we integrated? 7th grade, which was very difficult. We were bused and sent to a school that we knew nothing about. The teachers were very reluctant to want to teach us. The kids that we went to school with, our students, we should have been in unity together, but we were separated. One group here, one group there, and we graduated that way. To this day, we don't have class reunions together, which, you know, it hurt, but still that's the way it is. We didn't grow up being together. And when we came here and your next door neighbor was white, or you worked with nothing but whites and you got along, that meant that they were trying to do better. And then we get into 2020, and things of this nature come about to destruct that again, to bring it about. People had gotten where they wanted to get along. They wanted this world to be better. And now it's going right back to you're black, you're white, you're native, you're Asians. Why can't we just be humans and get along?
The military in Elmendorf specifically, people come from all walks of life. I mean, the people who join the military, the people who are in your neighborhood. And if you have a bias or a prejudice, it doesn't go away because you join the military. Now, a lot of it eventually goes away because you're close interaction with other people. But initially, people come and they have different ideas about who you are and what you're not. And again, in the big picture, it was minor because the people I worked with in my office, my shop, we became a family almost. And most of the people I work with today, we are still friends.
I would say I was more shocked, more of a culture shock for me. Because when I would go to California, I'd go often and stay with my grandparents and my aunts. And I would go to California and everyone would be, you know, predominantly, if not all, black. You know, it was no, I mean, maybe a teacher, maybe the principal. But other than that, all the students looked like me. And then I came to Alaska and it was the complete opposite. So for me, did I experience blatant racism growing up here? Not as much, more so in Los Angeles. You know, when I was young, or maybe I was so young that I don't, you know, recall a lot of it. But for the most part, people were kind to each other up here.
Again, I grew up down south where there was a imaginary but very visible line between black and white, the haves and the have-nots. And I tell people when I go outside, Alaska, for the most part, that line has been erased. Your neighbor, may be a millionaire on one side, and there may be a welfare family on the other side. That imaginary line of the have and have not is not as visible. It exists, but it's not as visible, and you're not, when you walk into a store, you're not treated as a welfare family or as a millionaire. You're treated as a customer. So it changed me from that atmosphere, that growing up and that having that mindset. It changed me to be careful when you meet somebody because you don't know which person you're meeting. And my goals in life and who I become is to make sure I treat everybody the same and give everybody the respect and hope that we all wish we had.
I had an experience. One of my roommates and I went to Elmendorf to pick up an old Willis Jeep, and on the way back, it stopped right in the middle of the intersection of 3rd Avenue and near Brother Francis Shelter, and it caught fire, and we were opened up the hood, and that just made the fire worse, and people stopped right on the spot, came out with fire extinguishers, pushed the Jeep out of the intersection, offered us a ride home, towed the vehicle, and made sure that we were okay. And wow, that blew me away. And that was within 9 months after I had come to Anchorage. Where I came from, relatives and people that you know will help you, but total strangers, no. But here it's different. I always run into beautiful people here. And I mean, to just go out of the way to be kind, business people and people that you meet. I walk nearly every day year round, if it's not too icy outside, and I meet people just out walking, and we just hit it off.
We fell in love with Alaska. And secondly, my husband, let me tell you a little bit about him too. When he came to Alaska, there was no assignment for him. He was his MOS, military term. MOS was administration. And so they said to him, Sergeant Foster, we're going to send you and an Air Force guy downtown to find housing for the military. There was no housing at that time for the military. And so his job was to go around, he and the Air Force guy were to go around Anchorage and find housing. And of course, that's what he was doing. So he was known around, you know. And so we just, you know, got to know people. Awesome. People are wonderful. I'm loved. That's why I'm still in Alaska. You asked me about Alaska. I'm loved. I have family here. I don't have biological family, but I have family. I have no need for anything.
I thought it was nice. All the people I ever met was just as nice as they could be. Yeah. I never had no problem with a person in my life. Any kind of person. I got along well with the boys, and I got along well with the ladies. Yeah, I just had a ball with people. Men and women, black and white.
When you were asking me earlier, I think you said, what did I love about Alaska or Anchorage? And that is what I loved, and what I still have, you know, a piece of that is the community closeness. And anywhere you go, if I left tomorrow and went out of state, let's just say Seattle, and if someone says, I say I'm from Alaska, what? You're from, you know, and that always starts a conversation. And anyone that was from Alaska that's moved, let's say, to that city where I'm at, we all seem to get together. Or if I need something, we just stick together even after we leave Alaska. So that closeness, that community, you know, sense of community, it exists outside of Alaska, if that makes sense. Yeah.
When I travel outside and people ask me, what do you like about Alaska? And I tell them there's two things. There's breathtaking scenery, and the people are good people. Now, I can see a change. There's a lot of partisan toxicity in the air now that's changing a lot of that. But back in the day, when I lived up in Delta Junction, it was only 3 African-American family up there. But there was still that sense that if you was an Alaskan and they saw me stranded, they would stop for me and pick me up, even though I was African-American, if somebody saw me in the road and the weather was bad out there.
There was a time when jogging wouldn't work or anything, walking the street, because everybody would pull over and say, "You need a ride? Where you going?" Unlike today, where everybody, pass you right on by. If you got out there on the street in Alaska back in the day, constantly, without you putting your thumb out, people are going to be stopping and offering you a ride. So if you wanted to walk in privacy and solitude, don't get on the road. Go in the woods somewhere.
Blood-wise, my family's in South Carolina, but relation-wise, spiritual connection, social connection, business connection, my family's Alaska.
It is so important because you don't know it, you're more likely to repeat some of the aspects of it that is not beneficial to you. But when you know your history, then it gives you an opportunity to take a different path. And so I've always been interested in history because there are so many little things that happen with history that people don't know. I'll just give you an example. The word cowboy. Now, the way the images have been constructed, you would think that a cowboy was a white person, and that was not true. They didn't even call white men cowboys. They called them cowhands. Cowboys were African Americans. Your Nate Love and Bill Pickett. Back then, it was the entertainment around the cow roping and all of that type of thing. And they had shows. And the African American cowboys had perfected that. And so it's that type of thing. It's like when, what is it, Rocky, instead of the image of, what's his name, that fought Muhammad, Joe Frazier, who is from Philadelphia, who was the one that beat the meat with he wasn't promoted. There's a statue there of a fictitious person called Rocky. So you can see how important it is to know the real history. Otherwise, you get images like that. Or like of the Lone Ranger, who was actually an African-American in real life, Bass Reeves, out of Arkansas, African-American marshal, very famous and known back in that time. I think he had over 3,000 arrests, killed over 30 men, and wore that mask. So that's where that story comes from. So that's why it's important in history. I would start with a gentleman by the name of Thomas Beavers. Thomas Beavers was African American. He was the first paid fireman here. He became fire chief during the 30s. He was the one that initiated the Fur Rendezvous on 9th and M Street and got that started. He developed Fairview subdivision, and he worked at developing Merrifield. And most people are not aware of that. Another individual that most people are not aware of is Michael Healy. Michael Healy was first African-American captain in the Coast Guard. And President Lincoln commissioned him, and he was in charge of the law in Alaska for almost 20 years. He was the only American law here, and he administered the law and worked with the natives. Most people are not aware of that. Now, the two unique things about those two individuals is both of them were from mixed parents, and they did not, and their complexion was of such, they did a lot of passing. You know, they just said, if nobody said anything, they didn't say anything. And the same, that's what happened to Thomas Beavers. They didn't even know that he was black until his sister showed up when he died. His sister showed up and freaked everybody out here in this town. They had a big old thing in the newspaper about how, what kind of contribution he had made to the city. He served on the assembly in 1941. But that was, just being black was an impediment. So a lot of people passed or tried not to emphasize that they were black because there was benefit. There was a system set up for whites.
Just today I was thinking about this new game show, and it's The Wall or something, I think, where they drop the ball in and the ball is coming down and it's bingly, 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 and finally it ends up somewhere. And that's the way a good number of people that I know, their life has been. They started out with a plan or a dream, and because of obstacles and, let's just say it out loud, systemic racism, their plans got diverted, some in a good way and some in a dream-killing way, but others were sometimes getting a little help and shove from somebody who said you need to be over here, and it ended out well for them.
My parents were sharecroppers, and so of course I remember the sweltering heat that we worked in and the conditions that we worked in, and also remember the people that lived in the town. The people that lived in the town had a different, should I say, body language about them than those that lived out. Because when you grow up in the segregated South and you grow up in a town that's all black, you end up acting different than those that live out because you don't have to cater as much to that Jim Crow system.
Okay, so this is 61, so it is right around there. And things had began, I mean, it was different. It was segregated, per se. And so I learned some things, though, not knowing the culture. And that's why it's so important now that we know the culture when we try to teach. Because I remember one day I was at Fairview, and I said to this kid, I said, just like Frank. I said, Frank's an Eskimo. He said, I'm no Eskimo. I'm a native. So I learned right then how important. And of course, Anchorage, after I think it may be a couple of years or more, Anchorage said that you had to take the culture, the native culture. If you're going to teach, you have to take the native culture, which was very good, And so I learned from there. But I've always had a love for history.
In this life, in the 62 years that I've been on earth, has been a joyful time for me. And I said I had a good home life in Mississippi. It was a difficult life. Like I said, I remember sometimes, and I don't try and dwell on the past. We would be doing our homework sometime, school, and we always got used books. We didn't get new books. We got used books, and you would open a book, and you would see words in the book that was related to us, calling us names. We would get used desk. And I had promised myself years ago when I left Mississippi that I would never, never enjoy used things. I wanted what belonged to me. I always wanted to be content and happy. I wanted to earn what I got. Because inside of me, it hurt so bad that you would be doing your homework and you would look for a page. You may be on page 12, the next 4 pages are torn out. So you somehow had to get it, call your friend and get it, guess what it was going to be, or tell the teacher I didn't do my homework.
My destiny began in the womb with my mother being a gospel singer. She imprinted in me vibration of sound. She sang daily in everything she did, every chore, walking down the street, washing dishes, washing clothes, whatever this woman was doing, singing was part of it. And so with me in the womb, trapped Catholic in a Baptist gospel womb, I learned that kind of music, which gave me an appreciation for all music, because once I was born, I came into a house where my grandmother was a Methodist and listened to Methodist hymns. My grandfather listened to country music. My father listened to big band and jazz, and my mother listened to gospel. So music appreciation was just infused in me, which also led to an appreciation of all people, because you're open to all sound, all vibration, and that frequency that I was talking about earlier. When you're in your right zone, you'll know it, you'll feel it, and the universe will cooperate with you.
Well, we grew up as sharecroppers, and in my opinion, it's worse than slavery. And I say that because with slavery, I've never been there, but my perception is you don't have anything, you don't expect anything, and you're not promised anything. Sharecropping, every year you're told if you do good, have a good crop, you pay your bills off, and you'll be out of debt. But every year we was told you almost made it.
The guy that I hooked up with, he really liked the way I worked. And that guy, he finally retired. And his name was Dean Carter. And when he retired, he got old-timers, or whatever that is. Anyway, he lost sight on his wife first. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know next was his daughter. He didn't know who his daughter was, or nothing like that. They could call him, and he wouldn't know who that was calling anything. But I tell you what, I could call him anytime I wanted to, anytime. And I called him and said, "Dean, how you doing?" And he said, "Hey, Jesse," just like that. Every time I ever called him, he said, "Hey, Jesse." And I was real proud of the fact that he knew me at any time. Anytime I called him, he knew me, and he didn't have to see me. He knew my voice and everything, and that's what he said. I thought that was so cool.
The Empire Room was a place where famous entertainers performed at. The biggest one was always Tony Bennett when he could come. Can you imagine in 1968, I could make $40 in one day. That was a lot of money. As a busboy, I was the busboy supporting the waiter. They would give me a part of their tips. And we would have entertainers like Alan King and Phyllis Diller and Ethel Marmer and Vicky Carr. These names may not be familiar with you. You might not be familiar with these names, but these some of the old entertainers, Alan King. These are the ones that I remember that come there. Also, downstairs, there was a place called Palmer House, and that's where I used to see Muhammad Ali. He used to come there and get a steak and a salad. That's all he would have was a steak and a salad. I remember that. That's where I met him at.
I went downtown because I was teaching the kids about how to elect a president. I mean, they did that work. I mean, I think it was the same time that Carter was running for the presidency. And so, taught them all about it. Got the register, you know, you got to do all this. And then we were really going to vote, but not for him. We were just going to vote that day. And so I went downtown and got the voting booth. I made my teaching very real. Went downtown and got the voting booth. This little girl came down and said, Miss Foster, this kid said he's not, I'm not going to call her name, anyway. This kid said he's not voting. And I said, oh, go tell him to come over here. I said, I understand you're not voting. No, my dad said nobody was worth voting for. I said, oh. I said, but whose class are you in? He said, Miss Foster's. Well, what are we doing here today? Voting? I said, what are you doing today? Voting? I said, yeah, you go down there and sign your name. I said, sign your name. I said, when you sign your name, you're going to get a ballot. You're going to go in the booth, but nobody's going to know whether you put anything on it or not. It's the same thing like me. Nobody knows when I go in there what I do. So you're going to do that, and you're going to fold that ballot up, and then you're going to put it over there. So that's all. And that was the way that I most of the time, that's really the way I do it. You know?
It started out, we had a family member that we kept, and it just kind of snowballed down from there. We went from there to keeping other kids, and we've always kept siblings because those are the hardest to place, are siblings. And after we had our last sibling group, we decided, well, we're a little too old for this now. And the kids that we had were with us for, what, 4 years. And they were up for adoption. And they had been placed in a home, and the home that they placed them in didn't turn out very well. So in the middle of the night, Will and I thought that we were all over. We're never going to do foster care again. You know, we carefree. We can hit the road when we would like. Social worker called and asked us if we would take the kids back. And I said to him, I said, Willie, they asked if we could take the kids back. And he said, well, you know, it's a lot of work. And he said, I can help you only so much. He said, but if you would like to do it, I would love to do it with you. So I told the social worker that they could come back. And it was about 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock that night. They pulled in the driveway, and the youngest said, we're home. And that's what the judge, when we went for adoption, everyone in the courtroom was laughing because the social worker, that's what he told the judge. When the youngest pulled in the driveway that night, he said, we're home. And they've been at their home ever since. This is their home now. We were too young. We were too young, but our families and people that we knew was involved. But yeah, we was too young, but we have a movement. We still, as we got older, we did things. We advocated to our friends that it was very important to vote. So still the movement kept, you know, we wouldn't walking with Dr. Martin Luther King, but we still had a movement. We still was there advocating, it's vote day. Vote day's tomorrow, you need to get out, you need to get going. Yes. We sometimes think that our vote don't matter, but it does matter. And you have to talk and you have to keep convincing that it does matter. Just because, you know, we voted for a president and he didn't get this that time, or we voted for the mayor and we didn't get the mayor that we wanted, that doesn't mean that your vote didn't count. It still counts. And it shows that it counts. You just have to keep diligently in your heart that I'm going to vote. I will make a difference. Yes.
And you also have to let people know that their vote matters, that their parents and grandparents, foreparents, they voted so we could be able to vote today. And we emphasize to our kids, you know, they have the right to vote because we had that right to vote. And that they vote would always count no matter what. I mean, sometimes it seems like it doesn't because at that particular time, the representatives, senators, or whatever may offer you something that they didn't come through with, you know, that would discourage you. But we as people shouldn't let that discourage us. We should vote anyway.
I had just come out of the Air Force, had been trained as a SAC-trained killer, Vietnam-bound, gonna go over and choke the life out of somebody. And fortunately, because of my background and the scores that I had obtained on my testing going into the Air Force, I ended up in missiles, Titan II missile system, and out in California. Never got to the mud of Vietnam. But at any rate, once that was all satisfied and concluded, I went back to Louisiana, and it was the summer of '64, Freedom Summer. All throughout my hometown, there was youngsters, black and white, marching, picketing, demonstrating, challenging the status quo of separate but equal, and that was exciting. And all of a sudden, there was a lady named Sarah McCoy, young lady, well, we were both teenagers, actually. She had been thrown out of Southern University, that's in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. She and Bobby Saucer, the two of them from my hometown, along with several others who had demonstrated in Baton Rouge, which is the capital of Louisiana. They had gone and done a big picket demonstration and, as a result, been expelled from Southern University. Well, they came back home, and rather than being in disgrace, they were viewed as heroes, man. And so it was Sarah McCoy who enticed me to join CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality. We went around that summer challenging the accommodations that were unavailable to African Americans. We went into the Ouachita Parish Public Library, and of course the police came. Sarah was accosted several times for going out to the white recreational center, which was municipally owned or city owned. Monroe City had this recreation, a little pool over on the other side of town for us in the colored section, but this enormous, elaborate facility out for the whites on the other side of town. And Sarah went out and challenged that, and the trucks and the KKK came circling around, and she ran into the office of the place and locked herself in and was able to call over to the CORE office, and we got word of it and ran over there, and it kind of ended then rather peacefully. But during that summer, again, I was involved with civil rights, and at the end of the summer, in September, I, along with Sarah and 6 others, were the first African Americans who were admitted to Northeast Louisiana State College there in my hometown. And then we came into December, and that's where this conversation that I told you, with them coming home from Alaska and enticing me to come there, and my grandmother eagerly wanting me to leave all that trouble alone.
So it was probably in the late 50s when I first got involved in NAACP. And I can remember one activity we had. We were selling tickets and collecting money to support the NAACP. And I won. I became Miss Smithfield, NAACP, because that's the section I lived in, Smithfield. So I won that.
Back when we first got here, 78, 79, and from the community aspect of it, I was involved in the community. I was the president of the local branch of the NAACP, and as soon as I took office in 1981, a young man was shot through the window But a young man by the name of Cassell Williams was shot through the window in Mountain View. And we later found out that he was mentally disturbed, but I thought the killing was unnecessary. I called, brought the Justice Department in, and one of the changes that we made was we changed the deadly force policy laws from a fleeing felon to life in immediate danger. Now, later on, in like 85, I think it was, the Supreme Court ruled that was illegal. But at the time, you could shoot somebody, say, for instance, you stole something that was worth $500 and you was running away, they could shoot you in the back, and that was justifiable homicide because you had committed a felony, and you could be killed for that. And so we changed that.
Coming here, there was the NAACP, and I found it to be a group of, as I had said, older people. It was headed at the time by a lady, Blanche McSmith, God rest her soul. A bunch of us young crazies went and challenged Mrs. McSmith, and somehow, crazily, I won the election, became the president of the NAACP at that time, and we had, well over 2,000 members. Because of the controversial election that took place, Blanche told everybody that this young Black Panther was coming in. Everybody got afraid. She had people joining the thing, and we had young people wanting to take over. So it was a great, big drive for membership, which resulted very well in the growth. And we were able to, as we learned, stand on the back of the achievements that they had done and bring it to the people. So there was a great bridging of having the resources that they had acquired, the contacts that they had acquired with friends in high places, in the banks, etc. We knew who to go to get money for the scholarships and that kind of stuff because of what these older people had done. So we young radicals learned from them. And I had the sense, I don't know where it came from, but I had the good sense to appoint some of her board members to come onto the board with me. So we had we didn't just go in and pull a coup and take over. I invited them into the board, and so we had Reverend Lyons of New Hope Missionary Baptist Church, right along with Jacoby Kawazi and Herb Chapman. And so we had both going, a respect in the street from the young people and a respect in the church from the old people. So it really worked marvelously at that time that we had the yin and the yang within the organization.
Since I have been here, I have seen a lot of change. I have seen the minorities be able to have better jobs, be accepted in better jobs, higher paying jobs.
It's different now than it used to be. I got into the trucking business, and I had a couple of rigs, and I hauled dirt, gravel, and asphalt. In the wintertime, I disconnected the trailers off the trucks and put the dump beds on and worked in the snow. That was the days when it really snowed. There was lots of snow in Alaska. It used to snow 6 inches every night, 12 inches some nights, and all of that. You could make a living in the snow. But it just ain't there anymore.
I'll tell you one thing that's changed, that is the violence in Anchorage. I don't remember, during the whole time I was here, I can't remember but 2 people that I knew that were killed, murdered And it's a lady that worked at API. I had some property in Mountain View, and I used to give her a ride. And her husband killed her. And another guy that I met in the 70s, and somebody murdered him. But that was basically it. And now it's like, my grandson told me every young person that's murdered in Anchorage, he knew them they went to school together.
It has changed so much. I mean, I grew up here, and so the sense of community is really, in my opinion, lacking now. The lack of cohesiveness, lack of a sense of community has changed so much. A lot of it has to do with the people that were here before no longer being here. But some of their families are still here, but we're just not together. I feel like we're lacking cohesiveness. I think, like I said, part of it is because people have moved on, moved back home. The community leaders, we're just scattered. You know, we need more togetherness, more cohesiveness, and work together more. You know, I'd like to see more of that. In the past, if you lived in Anchorage, especially the African American community, we were very close. We had a real sense of community. You know, you knew everybody. You know what I mean? It was more of a small town feel. And now we've had an influx of people from different places. Not that that's necessarily bad, but I think that it has caused a rift of some type. And it's just, we're just in completely different times than we used to be.
I think that a lot has been done, but then there's still more can be done. More programs, especially for children. Now, I do know they have the Boys and Girls Club that we didn't have when I first came out. So I think all those kind of things help a lot to bring the kids, to focus their mind on something positive, something they can really look forward to doing and being involved in. So
I think the big businesses and the money that come from oil should be invested in the young people, give them something to do, something to take pride in. Something like the Alaska arena, but on a scale where they can get involved and do something, because it's not much here to do for young people, teenagers and young adults. My granddaughter's 22, and she stopped going out just to have fun because of shootings. And we were getting to the point where we were afraid for her to go anywhere.
If everyone here would treat each other with dignity and respect, and to judge a person by the content of their heart and not the color of their skin, and we all can get along, and to me, Anchorage would be a much better place.
If there was less crime, and as my husband say, just get along. We don't have to live together. We don't have to hold hands every day, but just learn to live together and respect each other. Respect each other for what their values are, what they believe in. We don't have to go against the grain because we all are different. Just accept that difference.
The thing I would change is next to impossible, but I would love my community and all of Alaska, the world, but my community is if we could learn to sit down and remove the us and them, whether it's racial or whether it's political. We are so tied to our biases and our belief system that we very seldom hear what the other person is saying. We come into a conversation with our mind made up as to what is right and wrong and what we believe. And a lot of it is based on unsupported biases, things we heard, things we believe, things we want, selfish desires. And if we could, as a community, just could stop for a minute and listen to another person, I think most of the problems we have in the nation would disappear.
Advice to young people in Anchorage, the same that I gave to my children growing up, the same as we gave to our children growing up. You go to school, you get a good education, you learn to be respectful. You don't follow the crowd, or you don't be the follower, you be the leader. And that's not leading in a gang, that's leading in the right direction. And I've always felt is that if you respect others, eventually they'll become to respect you. But if you have no respect for yourself, you're not going to get respect. You have to, young people nowadays need to know, and for another thing, it's maybe this is not for everyone. We raised our children in a godly home. They were taught that you have to respect us. There's no if or buts about it. Respect in the house is what you have to give us. Nowadays, kids do not respect their parents. They have no respect for anyone. Respect means a lot. You have to have respect. You have to have that self-worth. Love yourself before you can love someone else. And so many of the young people nowadays don't love themselves. They think a gang is love. They think to go out and hanging in the streets is love, but that's not love. Love comes from our hearts. Love is one loving another, picking up a brother when he's fallen down. But young people nowadays do not care about each other. If we just love each other.
Just one law, and it's been written forever ago. Do unto others that which you wish to be done unto you. Follow that one rule in all that you do, and it will bring about harmony, respect, even when we disagree. I wouldn't want somebody to yell and spit in my face, so I'm not going to yell and spit in their face. I wouldn't want somebody to get mad enough to hit me, so I'm going to try not to get mad enough to hit them. So that little one thing, the yin and the yang of that, treat people as you would like to be treated. Treat your family members as wonderfully as you treat strangers. Sometimes we put on this big front with strangers and tell our, you guys, turn on the ones that we should say more. I appreciate you. I care for you. I'm sorry if I offended you. It's hard for people to apologize. People see an apology as a sign of weakness. An apology is a sign of strength. If you're strong enough to apologize to somebody, it liberates you and it liberates them, and hopefully it encourages them to do it for somebody else. Pass it around. Pass love around.
I'm going to tell you something. And you got to be careful what you say to kids, what you say, period. Words are powerful. And when you tell kids sometimes that you're not going to do anything, your dad didn't do anything, you're not going to do it. Don't say that. Don't say that. Oh, my kids say, you can do anything you want to do. You can be anything, I'll pass that on to. You can. And if you get it up here, that's where it is. It's up here. And that's what's leading me now. It's up here.
One of the things I would share with them, I would share with the parents, and I've seen this many, many times, teaching their kids a distinct behavior for dealing with the police, which is ridiculous. And I say, do not teach your kid a different behavior. Teach your kid the law. Teach your kid what the law is and stick with that. Don't teach them that you need to do this and do something different. That is the most ridiculous thing I ever could think of. Don't do that. Teach your kids the law and stick with that.
Alaska is a unique place. And there's, like anywhere else in the world, there's still somewhat of a divide between politics and race. And to blacks, it's easy to say I'm being mistreated and things should change, but I encourage blacks to become part of the military, become part of law enforcement. It's easy to look at an organization and say it's bad, but the way you make changes, whether it's your church, your family, law enforcement, or whatever, the way you make changes is getting involved, getting inside there, and bringing new ideas and proving to those who may have biases or prejudice that you are a human being, that you can do what they do. You deserve respect, you deserve a chance, but you can't do it from outside saying the system is bad. So I encourage people of color to get involved, and I know a lot of families discourage their sons and daughters from joining the military. Yes, there's a chance you could go to war, there's a chance you could die, but there's also a bigger chance that you could change the world. You could change one person at a time. Law enforcement is a big need in Alaska and everywhere, but for Alaska. The way you make a change, the way you change APD, the state troopers, or wherever we live, is getting involved in that and being part of it. And then you have more of a voice. You have standing now to say this is bad or good, but you can make a change. And unless we as people of color get involved in these different things, I'm the commander of the State Defense Force. Less than 0.5% is people of color. But we all live in a place where if an earthquake happened tomorrow, we want somebody to respond. We want somebody to be there. We want somebody to bring food and water. Well, be part of that group. Show that you're a part of Alaska, you're part of the community, and you want to be involved. And that's what I would encourage people of color to do, is get involved in all these systems, have a voice. And even if you don't join, get involved still. There's all these places have committees, and they take input from citizens. You vote, you get involved in the process, you can change things. You can't do it by complaining, you must be an active participant.
I always say to kids, and I'm around a lot of kids, you need to know this. I said, know who you are. You are no better, and you're no worse. Keep that in mind. You are no better, and you are no worse. I say, and stay focused, stay on it now. Get that education now, because that's going to be your key. And that's what I tell young people. And a lot of folks bring their kids back. They bring them by there so they can get that wisdom that I have. I'm sure everybody didn't love Rosa Foster, but that's okay. I believe if everybody loves you, something wrong. You understand? If everybody loves you, you know how that is. You know, and so as a teacher, I believe that our job is to love those, and I love the kids now. You can't teach if you don't love. If you're doing something that you don't love and you don't love the people that you're working with, you won't be as effective as you should be. That's what I know.
It's all about that, thinking out and reaching out for others. My cousin was on a Zoom with me. He's a big international speaker. Dr. Donald Davenport goes around the world speaking. I had him on Zoom, and he delivered a message on hope, H-O-P-E. And he said, the H meant that we need to have heroes, give honor to people. People of the past, people of the future, people of the now. We have to have heroes to inspire youth and us older people. So hope, H. O was opportunity. We have to have people believing that I can fall into the right hole. If I just stay on course, I will get there. The O. And then the P was perseverance and patience and persistence. He laid on that P. And then he said the E was extending out to others. Extend out goodwill and opportunity to others, and you'll find your own peace. That if you follow that, that is the hope. The heroes, the opportunity, and the perseverance will get it to the point where we will extend all of that to each other.
We need to bring back the sense of community, like our community leaders need to step up and be more visible. Or maybe there's a new wave of community leaders that, and I see a shift of that. I don't know if I'm supposed to say names, but what I mean is that there's a new generation of community leaders. I'm encouraged by what I see now. A few years ago, I was more discouraged, but I'm seeing some emerging, leaders. I'm seeing hope that we're going back to a little bit more, community-ness. And so I'm hoping that that's a good thing.
I guess for me, and as far as I know for myself, and I taught my children the same way, is when you go through life, you do the best you can. And if someone don't want to be bothered, then, you don't try to force yourself on them. But I know there are different times and there are different degrees of prejudice because different people think differently. And you can't change people, they have to be the one to change. But you can help change how you are being treated, but you cannot change the inside of a person. That's something they'll have to do.
I've been in certain stores, and if you didn't dress a certain way, I tested it. If you don't dress a certain way, you get walked behind to see if you're going to steal something, if you're going to take something. But if you go in and you're looking good and you're smelling good, hi, how you doing? Can I help you? You're not a liability. You're not going to take anything. But you know what? Those that are dressed up and looking pretty can steal just as well as those that are homeless. So it's all about stigma. What we look like, how we perceive each other, what we think of each other. Well, the natives on the street, they're not, we're better than they are. Well, I'm white, I'm better than you are, It shouldn't be that way. Life can be much more better if we just relax and say, let love flow. Let the goodness of our hearts go from one person to the other without looking at the color of our skin.
That I love the Lord.
That's a deep question. That I was a good person. That I tried to help people less fortunate. And that I tried to, do something for my community, make my community better. I'd like to be remembered like that.
Well, I hadn't thought of having anybody to remember anything about me. But I know all I can say about me is I have never been a bad guy. I've always been a good guy.
I think it would be being a person that gave more than I took.
It would be that I made a difference in someone's life, that I gave someone hope, that I gave someone respect, and that I treated them as a human being, and that treatment made them do the same. If I could be remembered for that person, all other things I could have accomplished in my life could be forgotten and it wouldn't bother me. But if I could be remembered as someone who gave someone hope and respect, that would be the best.
It would be for my kind-hearted, willing to lend a hand, help someone, to be a role model for others, to help people any way I can to have a better life.
That's being respectful and kind. Just two.
That I tried to inspire the young people. That was my effort, was to inspire young people to never give up and to pass along what Sister Consuela taught us. You never suck up to anybody, and you never, ever, ever look down on anybody.
I want to be remembered for that purple lipstick and how well I loved kids and how I tried my best to do what was right by them. That's what I want to be remembered by. And also as a mother, and being a good mother and being a good wife, that would mean more to me than anything, to be remembered that way.
Rhythm and vibration is part of the human experience. We are all born in a womb, and in that womb we hear a heartbeat. And sometimes that heartbeat, when the mother is at rest, is nice and slow and gentle. But then sometimes mother gets a little worried and things just start picking up, and that is also picked up by the baby. The baby's in the womb, in the water, and the vibration is working on that baby. So with that kind of imprinting to all of us, we all have receptors for sound and for vibration. Everybody feels that beat. No matter what it is. Now, the slaves wanted to communicate because some of them came from different places and had different languages, and they couldn't speak to each other. But they could all feel the rhythm. And when they had to work in unison, like 16 guys going in a boat, if they were out of rhythm, the boat would go in crazy fashion down the rhythm. But if 16 people are going, hitting their oars right with the same beat, the boat will stay focused and moving forward. So to communicate on chopping trees, doing boats, and everything else, there was always a person who set the tone of the beat. And that beat was usually dictated by the force of the water. In slower waters, the guys could go, and the men would whoop, 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 all 16. In rough waters, going against the mighty tide, all of them would be hitting at the same time. So that downbeat told them when the oar should hit the water. So the drum was used for working in the fields. Master, the overseer, the planter, said, I don't mind them out there making that music and beating and carrying on, because when they do that, they get more work done because they all in that unison, and my bottom line is improved. So the master encouraged music and the beat. Then the slave learned, master like us doing that, but we can sneak a secret message to each other. Even if we can't talk to each other, we can announce a wedding. A wedding sounds like, and we know somebody's having a wedding over there. Let's sneak away and go. Or they would have a funeral. So we're not going to go over there making a lot of noise because they're having a funeral over there. So those were the forms of communication coming out of the drum until Nat Turner come up and said, hey, that drum is loud enough to make a noise on this plantation that they can hear way over there on that plantation. So we're going to send out the signal. off at the loud sound. And everybody knew from plantation to plantation that those necks would go off right then. And that way, master couldn't tell that other one, they done started a revolt, they done killed somebody over here, arm up, because everybody died on the same night. After Nat Turner did that, master got smart. Say, we ain't gonna let them darkies ever have a drum again. So they came and took all the drums away. And the black folks didn't have no drum. So they started learning to make sound. With their bodies. And music is in the body and in the bone, and nobody can ever stop it. And every band has a beat coming back from the time that the drummer was in his mother's womb.